Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the fourth episode of Masochists Marathon. I hope you're doing well on this fine Sunday, or at least this will go out on Sunday, but you won't actually be watching it then. Who knows? But yeah, so welcome to the fourth episode. So the original premise for this episode was going to be starting to focus on trains. So I kind of get derailed, excuse the pun, from the idea of getting to the mining efficiency, because I thought mine efficiency is going to be good, but we do need a lot of research to get there, and I thought probably more important to make sure we have enough resources, currently access to get more resources. And I really wanted to do it with trains. I didn't want to be running a massive long belt from that area down south of us to the new iron patch, and I thought maybe trains would be more efficient. So that's what we focus on this episode. But after recording this episode, maybe that would have been a good idea, but we'll go into that more as it comes around. So we start the episode off with laying out the area that's just going to produce all the stuff we're going to be using quite a bit, because I thought, okay, so we'll start the episode off. We'll finish doing plastics as we started researching it last episode, and then we'll start doing the research for the trains. But I didn't really look to the extent at what research is required to reach trains. I didn't really think it through properly, but oh well, we carried on regardless. So we're just going to lay out a column which is going to make assemblers, electronic miners, that sort of thing. It just seemed the next obvious thing to do just while we wait for stuff to be researched. But I didn't really take into account just how long the research is required to start getting the stuff for trains. I also started laying out the area on the wrong side of the bus. We kind of need a bit more space. And then I think about moving the circuits belts, and actually, to begin with, iron and green circuits are going to be used the most anyway. So it kind of works out in the end. And we get that laid out, so we start laying the things on the correct side of the bus. So we finish off plastics, and for trains we need engines, and for engines we need steel. So I thought after plastics we'll do steel furnaces, because then at least we'll get full columns of ore as well from our smelting columns with the 12 steel furnaces on either side. So yeah, this was just in the meantime to keep me occupied. But again, in hindsight, now I've recorded it, this probably would have been quite a large, expensive resources, and something I shouldn't have really done just yet, because I can craft what we need by hand. And is this area really necessary to have all these items buffered to a certain extent, being the one stack in a chest? But then thinking about it again, we are going to be using all of these products made by this column anyway, so it's not as if we're wasting a load of resources. It's not like it's going somewhere we're not going to use it at all. But maybe in hindsight it would have been a better thing to do once we are comfortable with resources. But to be honest, the episode would have been me just stood around waiting for the research to be done. If we were to do this the most efficient way from the resource that we have coming in at the moment, it just would have been really slow and waiting for ages. So we get advanced material processing going next, which is a little bit quicker than plastic, so it doesn't take us too long. At the start of the episode we did set up some smelting of stone for some bricks ready for those steel furnaces. But yeah, so now I've gone and sat down, and past me's played for this hour, and I've realized how far I've got. Maybe it would have been a good idea just to produce a huge amount of belts and just have a ridiculously long belt running over. Yeah, it would have been 1 belt's worth of throughput, and to upgrade that to 2 would have been pretty crazy, but it would have been quicker than this. And we'll end up using those belts anyway, so yeah, I can't really decide. But to be honest, getting onto trains would be nice. Trains are a great way to access all the resources we need, so we'll see. I think we've got enough resources to get there. We just need to focus what we've got on making sure that we do actually get there. But we get the column to produce assemblers, electronic miners, fast inserters. We don't bother to get it doing normal inserters. I was going to begin with, but if I ever need those, I can craft them. Same for long-handed, and we also get belts, splitters, and underground belts as well, because we are going to be using quite a few of those. And we also get buffers in for all of the products, almost forgetting last minute the buffers for splitters and underground belts, but we do get them in there. And the air is a bit fiddly. Some things will get produced more than others. I think there's stuff sharing iron cog producers, so yeah, we're not going to get miners until we've got a full stack of assemblers. So Yeah, probably not the best area to build when you're really lacking in resources, but oh well, that's what we did in the end. And we're already losing miners on the edge of the iron patch. We have to come and take a depleted miner away. We fill the rest of the patch in as well. We might as well get this whole thing mining, and we kind of tidy up the zigzag belts that I never really was a very big fan of. But we look at getting 2 belts worth of yellow in, because yeah, this does just about input just over a single yellow belt, so it's a good idea to get these in. And we might as well get this all this patch mined, so we have a good idea of how long it's going to last us, which is not going to be very long, but I hope it will last us long enough to access the next patch. And the resources from that, I think I will focus on making sure we discover or gain access to the next patch of iron that's become visible. So we do have a good look at the map near the end, so we'll be able to see it then. But up in the northwest, the radars have discovered quite a big patch. I think the one south of us, just southwest, is 800k. The radars have found one on the map that's 1.2, 1.3 million, so that's quite a handy patch to have found. So yeah, once we've accessed this other patch with trains, we'll then focus that heavily on creating things like ammunition and turrets to gain access to that other patch, and then we can start to be a little bit more frivolous with our resources. But that's going to be one of the premises for this series. We're going to have to be very careful with where we spend resources. I can't just go and build some mammoth defense wall around the base, because I'm just not going to be able to afford it. I need to focus on getting the next patch, and then as soon as we've found that, make sure we know what's going to be involved for getting the patch after that, you know. And it's what happens when you combine really weak resources with a really low frequency along with a death world. But you know, that's what I chose to play, and that's what's going to happen. So we're just going to have to deal with it. But yeah, we decided to start laying out the next smelting column, which is going to be for steel. And I kind of got a bit carried away in my head with how much steel is actually needed for trains. You only need a very little bit to create the engines for the train. Yeah, we have got more expensive recipes, so I don't exactly know how much steel is going to be needed. We only really need 2 locomotives for now, or even 1 just to run the train, but I want to at least go with my design. But we come and have a look at the 8 belt balancer, because it's kind of lagging a little bit. I've probably got the resources going in the wrong part of the balancer for this early, but I know there are some throughput issues with the 8 belt balancer, so I keep trying to look at that. But we carry on laying out a minimum amount of the steel smelting, because yeah, we don't really need that much, but we do need some coming through. So we get half of the column up and running with normal stone smelters, but it would be nice to get on with the steel smelters. But again, this is a very frivolous use of our resources. I really didn't need to set this up just to get a couple of trains running. My thought was, first half of the episode, we'll get the research done for engines, and we'll get that done. Second half, we can get stuff like rails researched, and then we can get those products added to that production column. Hence why I was building the production column. And then for some reason, we had selected lab speed. I wasn't happy with how quickly the labs were using up the available packs, and I thought that might speed things up. But yeah, that was another really silly move. So I really need to focus more before I start recording an episode on exactly what I'm going to do, because I just jumped straight into this one straight after recording the last episode, and I could have thought about it a bit more and been a bit more intelligent with the direction I'm going to go in each episode. And I should have really learnt this from Bob's Angels, because it was a bit of a problem at the start of recording Bob's Angels. I sometimes didn't think properly before an episode about what I was going to do, and then I would start doing it, and I'm kind of surprised I've fallen into this trap already on this series, because you know, I would have thought of learned quite a lot from that, and I learned so much from doing that series, and I just need to make sure I focus on actually applying those things. So we start getting a bit of steel being smelted, and this is where I kind of realise the extent of how expensive steel is going to be in this playthrough. So if I remember correctly, it's 35 iron plates for 1 steel plate. So this is going to consume a huge amount of iron, and I really should have realised just how much iron would go into just getting a little bit of steel, and that's probably when I should have decided, no, let's just go chuck in a stupidly long belt, and then we can deal with trains in a little bit. yeah, I'm quite stubborn sometimes, and I just decide to continue. I also forget the key controls for the belt brush belt balancers, but it is Shift Control B, because I decided to just come and put a 4 balancer in now, and to be honest, we could fit 2 4 belt balancers in next to each other for the 8 balancer anyway. But yeah, I decided to chuck that in for a 4 now, because there's no issues with throughput there when you use a 4 in that way. But we come back to the steel smelting and start getting all of these converted to steel smelters, which, yeah, it's just the theme for this episode, basically. Me just not making the best decisions in the world in terms of efficiency, because we're going to run out of this ore patch, and we're going to start mining the other one, and we're going to start spending resources on defending that patch because it's so near the Red Sea of biters, and this really wasn't the best move from preventing this series going down the plug hole from spending all of the little resources we have at the start. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see how many episodes this series ends up actually lasting for. And then we come back to the research, and I've really lost focus this series. I start researching bullet damage, which is going to be handy when we are going to be pushing biters back for stuff, but it wasn't with my focus of wanting to do trains, so I really don't know why I started that going. I think I realized at some point and I change it for trains, but I also noticed from last episode I had another 2 boilers and 4 engines. Sorry, 4 boilers and 4 engines. So I then make some more engines just to extend the power again, because we want to be nice and far ahead on that. But I am going to have a go at doing that layout I was talking about last episode. I haven't had a chance to do it on a test map yet, but I really want to try that and see what happens. We also increased the number of miners, because I believe we're using more coal now than we are currently mining, so we don't want that running out. And we come back and continue to upgrade the steel smelting area to steel smelters. You know, it sort of, for some reason, made really sense to me last episode, but it's clearly wasn't the best thing to do. I could have just set up a few smelters, got enough steel for the number of engines we need for a train, locomotive, and then just left it at that until we get access to that patch. So yeah, it's kind of the theme for this episode, just teaching me another lesson to not lose focus. So next episode, I'll take a proper look at trains and stuff and just see if it really is the best way to continue heading. I think I will, being as I've started it now, but we need to make sure it's actually going to be possible that we can access that patch with it. And even then, the train that we are going to be putting in place to get it is going to be extremely basic, because of course we've got to research all of the signals and stuff as well to make the proper track. And the track itself, we need to get that made, which means I may put some stone down the bus to the production area, or I might just put in some crude thing somewhere for now. I don't know. We shall see. But we finished laying out the steel column, or almost all of it, apart from a couple of long-handed inserters, and we get the iron column done as well. And all of this is very unnecessary, because we haven't even got enough iron coming through to feed all of these areas. This is literally all just for a little bit of steel, but I had it in my head that I was going to upgrade all of the columns to steel smelters. But yeah, at 35 units of iron for a unit of steel is pretty mental. And I guess it kind of decides what I was asking last episode about with piercing ammo. I don't think I'm going to move to piercing ammo anytime soon. I'm going to try and go with regular ammo for as long as I can, until it becomes ineffective against the inevitably evolving biters. So we extend that second belt of yellow up to feed this ridiculous pointless area even more, but I need to take a proper look and bring that back a bit. So yeah, we come and actually review what we were researching, because bullet damage wasn't right. We should have focused straight on engines, and I think if we'd gone for engines straight away, we'd probably be doing a little bit better. But we come and stick the steel into the production column, because we're going to need it for the engines at least. And we just shuffle around the copper inserter for this area as well. Even though we're not using copper yet, we're going to need it, because we'll get turrets and stuff produced down here as well, because we're going to start using turrets a lot more soon. In fact, we haven't placed any yet. I think I've researched them, but I haven't had to make any as of yet, because none of the pollution is getting near any of the biters, thanks to our big starting area. I kind of needed that just to get going, because as soon as we do start slaying biters, it's going to be very difficult from there on out. Although I might be taking biters a bit too seriously this series because I am used to playing with rampant AI, and I should probably be slightly less concerned with them, although still not too blasé. I don't want to let the biters win on this one just because I haven't got rampant AI on, and I don't think they're very intelligent, but we'll see. I haven't played a vanilla game since before Bob's Angels, so it's been a very long time for me, and I can't even remember what default biters are like exactly, but looking at the iron patch in the northeast, I'm really curious what the minimum amount of biter slaying is that I need to do to be able to access it safely, and we'll see how big the pollution cloud ends up being from it. But yeah, with this increased cost of recipes, so for steel taking up 35 iron plates, I wonder how many of those columns of 24 steel smelters you need to produce just for one yellow belt of steel. I'd be quite interested to know that. I could probably go and work it out, but yeah, quite interested to know there. One thing I start doing now is prioritizing that second belt of iron to only feed the iron smelters and not go into the steel area. I really need to cut down how much ore is actually going into steel, because to be honest, we've probably already got enough for enough engines to produce a train, and that's all we really need until we access that second iron patch. But we'll see. That'll be quite a bit of a revelation accessing that iron patch. We do get this bottom iron column upgraded to steel smelters, so we have at least one full iron belt coming out of there, because we need that heavily for the research still. And we also look at bringing this second iron belt down to the second iron smelter, because of course that is also feeding standard iron in for us. And we also come and take this splitter out because we don't want that feeding onto the other belt if the second one backs up. But that's just to prioritize these two columns over the steel column at least. At the end of the episode, we actually cut off any iron ore going to the steel smelters, and I'll only switch that back on if we absolutely need to, or once we have the iron coming in over the train. But we come and just check on science just to see why we're not using all the labs, and it's just because all the labs are using up all of the science packs being produced, so no massive issue there. But again, once we're a bit more comfortable on resources, it would be good to double up our production of science, at least double it up, maybe even more when we get further into it. But that's the weird dynamic I'm playing here with the expensive recipes, with the increased technology costs, so it takes more science to research stuff, and my low poor richness patches, so poor richness, low frequency. So that's the horrible masochistic dynamic I've chosen to play with, but I'm determined to make it work, so we'll see. It's just this episode's been a real big lesson on how much I really need to focus on what I'm spending resources on. So we finally get engines achieved, and I then realized to get to the first rail research, we need to do logistics too. So yet another stumbling block. Maybe I could have got to some tracks at the end of this episode, so next episode we can start laying track. But no, we need to get through logistics too before we get any of the track. And I think there's even another research we need for stations to even automate the trains. So yeah, I don't even know if we're going to get much of the train done next episode, but I'll have a look at the start of recording and see exactly what is required, because I didn't even do that this episode. I thought, trains, yeah, it's going to be well easy, but I completely forgot about the increased cost of technology. So we at least get production of engines set up. I also decide to take out all of the inserters for all the products along here and reconnect this back up. I don't think I mentioned me switching this area off earlier. I did do it at some point to save iron, because I realized how much iron it was taking away from science, and we need science to obviously achieve getting iron. So now that we have to wait for logistics and the research for the trains, there's not really much more I could achieve in this episode without spending resources where we don't need it, apart from completely avoiding trains and going for a transport belt from here. We also discover a tiny little patch that we uncovered in the first episode that I forgot to mention in post-commentary, but just north of us is a tiny little patch of about 8.9k, so that'll last for ages. And while checking on the iron patch we want to achieve with trains, we find a couple of biter nests that have come and settled down right next to the patch, so it'd be a good idea to get rid of these before the base gets any bigger. I believe they grow in size after they've set up. We put a couple of turrets in where their base was. We put one on the ore patch. We just come and check over to the east of the iron while we just make a couple more turrets just to make sure they don't come and nest here anymore. And I also decide to put a radar in just because of how important this iron patch is. We need to keep an eye on it. We need to make sure nothing really happens. So we crudely chuck in some of the horrible old power poles that I really don't like, that I wouldn't be using if resources weren't such an issue. But now we can keep an eye on it real time. I also take a quick look at how much a miner would get from that one patch. But yeah, to be honest, it's not really that far to connect with the transport belt. So if I'm really desperate, I'll be able to just hook that area up. But as you can see there, we are losing iron miners already, which is a bit of a concern. But I stick some of the steel smelters we have on us just to try and get a full saturated copper belt. So we just come and look at the tiny trickle of steel we have coming through, and this is where I decide to cut the ore off to it, because I can just let some of the ore through whenever we need steel. But considering how expensive the steel is, it's really probably not the best idea. So we leave the episode with a nice view of the map, just in case anyone wants to have a good look around. There's a relatively big coal patch near the iron. We're going to need coal soon with the amount of that's going into power. There is also a huge patch up to the northeast that we have discovered. But you can see then the northwest, the third iron patch that we're going to try and achieve. But that's going to require some considerable biter slaying. So that's going to be all we have time for. I do hope you have enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and please do come and join me in the next episode. Bye-bye.